Greetings, everyone. We are the Group 5, and the topic that we are going to present in this video presentation is all about Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. It is one of the most important works on the early history of the Spanish colonization of the Philippines. But before anything else, allow me to introduce to you the presenters. The presenters for today are Cadet Nolasco Jerico and yours truly, Cadet Gapoy Frednixen B. Before we discuss results annotations, let us first learn some background about Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas and Antonio de Morga.
Good day, this is Cadet Nolasco and I'm going to discuss the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. The values of Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas has long been recognized, a first-hand account of the early Spanish colonial venture into Asia. It was published in Mexico in 1609 and has since been re-edited on a number of occasions. It attracted the attention of the Hakluyt Society in 1851, although the edition prepared for the society by H.E.J. Stanley was not published until 1868. Morga's work is based on personal experience or on documentation from eyewitnesses of the events described. Moreover, as he tells us himself, survivors from Legazpi's expedition were still alive while he was preparing his book in Manila, and this too he could consult. As a lawyer, it is obvious that he would hardly fail to seek such evidence. The Sucesos is the work of an honest observer himself, of a major actor in the drama of his time, a versatile bureaucrat who knew the workings of the administration from the inside. It is also the first history of the Spanish Philippines to be written by a layman as opposed to the religious chroniclers. Morga's book was praised, quoted, and plagiarized by contemporaries or successors. Filipinos have found it a useful account of the state of their native culture upon the coming of the conquistadors. Spaniards have regarded it as a work to admire or condemn according to their views and the context of their times. Some other Europeans, such as Stanley, found it full of lessons and examples. It is made up of 8 chapters. The first chapter of 7, which documented the tenures of the governor generals that served in the Philippines from Miguel Lopez de Legazpi's term in 1565 to Pedro de Acuña in 1606. Each chapter 8, called An Account of the Philippine Island, offered substantial depictions of the native during the Spaniards' arrival in the Philippines in the 16th century. Who is Antonio de Morga? Antonio de Morga Sanchez Garay was a Spanish soldier, lawyer, and a high-ranking colonial official for 43 years in the Philippines, the Spain and Peru, where he was president of the Real Audiencia for 20 years. He was also a historian. In the late 16th century, Antonio Morga served in the Philippines as a Spanish administrator. He started working for the Spanish government in 1580 and served as the lieutenant governor, which was the second most powerful post in colonial Philippines in 1593, and eventually in 1598 as an audiencia or Spanish court judge. He was, however, subjected to a corruption inquiry that found him guilty and would have sent him to the gallows if he did not die in 1636. Importance of result annotation. Jose Rizal's annotation of Antonio Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas has been recognized as the first Philippine history penned from a Filipino's viewpoint. Results offered an outline of a linear conception of Philippine historical accounts when he published his Annotation of Morga Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. Rizal no limitangere tackled the 19th century, which was Rizal's present. His El Filibusterismo and his essay, The Philippines, a Century Hence, dealt with the future, whereas his Annotations of Morga Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas covered the past. What leads Rizal to Sucesos de las Islas? Rizal was an earnest seeker of truth, and his marked him as a historian. He had the burning desire to know exactly the conditions of the Philippines when the Spaniards came ashore to the islands. His theory was the country was economically self-sufficient and prosperous, and entertained the idea that it had a lively and vigorous community. He believed the conquest of Spaniards contributed in part to the decline of Philippines' rich tradition and culture. He then decided to undertake the annotation of Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de la Isla Filipinas. His personal friendship with Ferdinand Blumentritt provided the inspiration for doing a new edition of Morga Sucesos, devoting 4 months research and writing and almost a year to get his manuscript published in Paris in January 1890.
This is Cadet Gapoy and I am the next presenter. So let us now proceed to Rizal's objectives why he annotated the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. So by publishing his annotated version of De Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, or also known as Events of the Philippine Islands, originally published in 1609, Rizal's intent was not only to provide the Filipino people their early history, a pre-Spanish history, but to present to them their own authentic culture and identity. Actually, Rizal played a vital role in establishing and reshaping the Filipino history because by publishing the annotated version of Morga Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, he was able to rectify and correct some misconceptions of the other countries regarding the Philippines, and he also confirmed some facts that was written by De Morga. For whom did Rizal dedicate the annotated version of Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas? Rizal offered the annotated Sucesos to the Filipinos with the wise counsel that to foretell the destiny of a nation, it is necessary to open the books that tell of her past. Reasons why Rizal chose to annotate Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. Surely, Antonio Pigafetta's account of the Magellan expedition was more detailed and closer to the point of first contact between the Philippines and Spain. Rizal's choice of reprinting Morga rather than other contemporary historical accounts of the Philippines was due to the following reasons. The original book was rare. Morga was a layman, not a religious chronicler. Rizal felt Morga to be more objective than the religious writers whose accounts included many miracle stories. Morga, compared to religious chroniclers, was more sympathetic to the Indios. And finally, Morga was not only an eyewitness but a major actor in the events that he narrates. Morga Sucesos was originally published in Mexico in 1609 and was therefore rare. In his introduction, Blumentritt notes that the book is so rare that the few libraries that have a copy guard it with the same care as they would an Inca treasure. Aware of most of the books written about the Philippines, he selected the Sucesos because he considered it necessary to invoke the testimony of an illustrious Spaniard who governed the destinies of the Philippines in the beginning of her new era, and witnessed the last moments of our ancient nationality. His annotations included clarifications and amplifications of details, refutations of statements where necessary, and confirmations when checked against other sources. So let us now proceed to the excerpts of Rizal's annotations. Actually, although Rizal wished to embark on some historical research, he restrained himself, admitting his inadequacy in a letter to Austrian ethnographer Ferdinand Blumentritt. This is because he has not read as many books about his country, and the Spanish libraries are close to him. Furthermore, Rizal's time is needed for other things, and everything he would say will always be suspected of having been inspired by a partisan spirit. However, he finally changed his mind when he finally got a letter of introduction from the Direction of India Office Library, Reinhold Horost. He applied for and was granted a reader's pass to the British Museum, where he began to consult early printed materials on the Philippines. Close to 18th of August 1888, Rizal was copying out by hand the entire first edition of Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, annotating it along the way, confident that Antonio Rigodor, a wealthy countryman in exile in London following the Cavite Mutiny of 1872, would publish the work when completed. As an added incentive, Regidor promised Rizal that as soon as he had recovered his investment in the book, all profits would be divided equally between the author and publisher. Rizal, however, was a realist who accepted that scholarly books such as Morga would not be financially rewarding. Thus, he stated in a letter to Blumentritt that his aim was simply to present a new edition to the public, above all Filipino public. As he stated, "I do this solely for my country because this work will bring me neither honor nor money." His fears proved correct, for he did not earn anything from the Morga. In fact, Rigodor unexpectedly backed out of the venture without the courtesy of an explanation. One of Rizal's friends hinted at racism, as Rigodor was of Spanish extraction. After all, his work in the copying, editing, and annotation of the Sucesos, Rizal had a finished Philippine studies manuscript but no publisher. Undaunted by the initial frustration, Rizal decided to publish the Morga himself. By the end of September 1889, he had brought the manuscript to Paris, where printing costs were lower than in London. His extensive annotations of Morga's work numbered no less than 639 items, or almost 2 annotations for every page. Rizal also annotated Morga's typographical errors. He commented on every statement that could be nuanced in Filipino cultural practices. Now let's talk about the state of the Philippines during the pre-colonial period by comparing the points of view of Morga and Rizal.
Let's talk about geography. In location, Morga said the Philippines was uninhabitable. It extends up to 12 degrees south latitude. But Rizal said Ptolemy in his geography indicated 3 islands, which are Senade, Gilolo, Ambonia, and their inhabitants. Thus, Philippines was not deserted and was actually habitable. It is actually at exactly 25 degrees and 40 minutes latitude north until 12 degrees latitude south. In climate, Morga said winters and summers are opposite of those in Europe. Rainy weather is from June to September. Summer is from October to May. But Rizal said, in Manila, by December to February, the temperature goes down more than it does during August to September. Thus, with regards to the season, it resembles Spain as all the rest of the northern hemisphere. In plant species, Morga said betel pickle, and ginger are abundant, but Rizal said bitul is kasuba in Tagalog. Culture and society. In body tattoo, Morga said draws pattern first before putting black powder where the blood goes out. Rizal agreed. It is the same method as the Japanese. In indigenous people, Morga said tribes of whom cannot be safe because of violence, but Rizal said they will always choose violence until the government enters because of their inhuman ways, as answer to those who do not submit to friars. In lifestyle and moral principles, Morga said men and women are money-loving and in capitals, so when there is a prize they yell. Bathing their body on the rivers or streams regardless of their age. But Rizal said, we find it everywhere in the world, even Europe. Indios have hygienic customs, which is the proper way of taking a bath. In government, Morga said there are no kings or lords to rule them. Morga was critical of the system of government because there are no rulers for myriad communities, instead one leader for each tribe. Rizal agreed that there were no such kings. Rizal argued that it was better that way because having a leader that knows what the tribe needs and what problems they have is more effective. In food, Morga said they preferred to eat salt fish which began to decompose and smell. The ordinary food of the native is a very small fish which they called law-law. But Rizal said it is called bagoong, and all those who have eaten it and tasted it know that it is not or ought to be rotten. It seems that Morga referred to tawilis or dilis, which is eaten by natives in the large quantities. Faith, belief of crocodile. Morga said the natives set traps on the borders of rivers and streams near their settlements to secure them, from which they fear and venerate. But Rizal said it is just like how other nations have their respect to lions and bears, putting their symbols on their shields and giving them vulnerable epithets. Healers. Morga said grave sorcerers and wizards who deceive the people and communicate to them whatever they will. They believe in omens and superstitions. They could tell whether the sick person would live or die. But Rizal said, proved through the story of Padre Quirino about the case of Armando who is sick. He often offered his body to see if he will be cured. But if he was cured, what could be said now to all who died despite all the masses offered to the different virgins? Customs for the dead. Morga said they buried their dead in their own house, keeping their bodies in bone for a long time in boxes and venerating their skull. But Rizal said, we find it much more natural and pious to venerate the remains of our loved ones than those fanatical martyrs whom we have no dealings and who probably will never remember us. Last but not the least, economy. Morga said, cotton is traced through the island which they sell and trade as threads. The natives of the islands sell the artifacts to the Japanese. The natives are always mining for gold, but when the Spaniards came, the mining became lesser and they just treasured that gold jewelry they have and passing it through generations. But Rizal said they also have cotton and not just rice. Rizal agreed it is a very interesting history shape and valued with the price of 100 offered for one of them. The Indios, on seeing that wealth, aroused the capacity of the encomenderos and soldiers, abandoned the work in the mines, and the priest historians relate that, in order to save them from vexations.
Let us now proceed to explanation. Part 1a of this excerpt is they prefer meat and fish, saltfish which begins to decompose and smell, which to any reader would depict that the type of food natives eat, such as meat and fish, are rotten. It gives the reader an interpretation that the food that Filipinos eat before are already spoiled, which can give Filipinos an impression of disgust. The reason why Rizal, in his annotation, used other countries' rare food preferences is to show that just like them, Filipinos too have their own food or dish that is unfamiliar to foreigners. This only shows that each country have their own culture, wherein such case can be seen in the food its natives eat. In this excerpt, Morga showed how Filipinos are scared of these animals and would put barriers so as for them not to be reached. But he was also trying to imply that by putting these barriers, show a fine line between the superiority of Filipinos to the animals and that they should be given respect. Filipinos worship and protect crocodiles, like how other nations treat lions and bears, because it represents the culture of the Filipinos. Rizal sees crocodiles as the embodiment of our ancestors, therefore, this should be respected and honored. Also, the crocodiles back then symbolized physical power. What Rizal wanted to say was that the crocodiles are linked to the Filipino culture and identity, and that the crocodiles somehow reflect the Filipinos during that time. The crocodiles brings us pride, so they should also be protected and honored. Lastly, Rizal wanted to correct Morga's claims about the Philippines so that Philippines will not be wronged by the foreigners who have read Morga's. Also, Rizal wanted to point out that before Morga's arrival, before the Spaniards came to the Philippines, we had our own life. For Rizal, it is important for the propagandists to be aware of the history of the Philippines before the arrival of the Spaniards, so they would know what to aim for, what to look for reform. Because back when Spaniards weren't present, the Philippines already had freedom. The natives had identity. What Rizal wanted for propagandists was to ask for reform which will bring back what we were when Spaniards weren't here.